So that concludes our presentations. I'd now like to hand over to Rosetta, who's going to lead the Q&A session.
Thank you, Vanessa. At this point, I'd like to ask all four speakers if they could please come up. I hope you've all got your questions ready.
Shall we move them over a little bit?
Sorry. Everyone can see you. Just wonder if anyone's got a burning question, if you just want to raise your hand.
Not a burning, but I have a
Go
question.
on.
Are there any clinical trials in South Australia at the moment
Of course.
for stage 2,
Stage 2.
newly diagnosed?
I'm not aware.
Okay. That's,
Oh, high-grade series?
yeah.
I don't think we have, at least in southern Adelaide. Roll Adelaide, I have to check from last memory from August when we had a list of trials sent out. Was none for
Nothing.
early stage.
Okay, thank you.
Question? Nicola, I've got a question for you. Sometimes we get on the our helpline some women who ring and ask questions about genetic testing, and they're worried about insurance because they're worried it's going to affect their life insurance or their children's insurance. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
So I think from an insurance point of view, in Australia, your personal and family health history doesn't impact on health insurance. What impacts on that is what policy you choose and the age at which you take it out. So once you reach a certain threshold, then there are additional fees. But the law in Australia is that for health insurance, the risk needs to be spread across the whole population. For other types of insurance, for instance, life insurance, income protection insurance, trauma insurance, those insurances are impacted by everybody's personal and family health history, and a genetic test result is part of that history. So that if you're seeking insurance and you have a family history of cancer but haven't had cancer yourself, you need to declare the history that you know. And if you are asked if there's a known genetic error in the family and you know there is one, then you have to declare that information, and that will impact on the ability to get insurance. However, there are two sorts of insurance. There's the insurance you pay for, and there's the insurance you get from having appropriate health care. And there's the insurance your children and your grandchildren get from having appropriate health care. And so although having a genetic test and being found to be a carrier of a genetic error in a gene that predisposes to cancer will impact on children's insurability, from a payment point of view, it will also impact on their ability, if they carry the genetic error, to have the appropriate health care. And if they don't carry the genetic error, to argue that they should be insured at the population rate because they aren't at increased risk of experiencing the cancer.
Could I just say with travel insurance, nothing. You
No.
don't get anything.
Yes, you don't get anything.
You for the cancer. So, but if you fall over and break your camera like I did, you'll get it for the trip to the doctor and you'll get some reimbursement for your camera.
I'm ringing tomorrow because we're heading to Bali next week before treatment starts, and the lady said, oh, you need to ring
Have you got your
if you've
insurance?
got your diagnosis, and I just got the diagnosis.
Have you got your insurance
I
already?
got
for
it
Bali?
months ago.
Then you do not have to ring them.
No, that's
So if you already have your insurance in place,
Because she said
and
you need to ring me when you
ring-
get your diagnosis.
what do you mean? So when you took it out,
I didn't know that I had the cancer.
then you do not need to let them know.
Only
you
because I had to
didn't-
rebook the trip. That's why I
Yeah.
told her I had to rebook the trip because I was having surgery.
So then you need to find out, but the point at which you apply for the insurance
It
and
was
it's
all
granted,
Yeah,
you don't
before.
have. So if you've
Okay,
got
that's
life
interesting.
insurance and you have a cancer diagnosis, you
After.
do not need to declare that. The only time you need to declare it is if you're taking out a new policy or you're
Yeah,
changing
new.
your policy. Now,
Okay.
if you've already made a claim on your insurance,
Yeah, well, I didn't. I just, yeah. Okay,
so you might need to look at your policy carefully and seek
Yeah.
some advice, and maybe seeking some advice through an insurance broker rather than the representative for the insurance
yeah,
company.
yeah. Okay, thank you.
There are 11 countries, I think it's 11 of one countries in the world where we have reciprocal health. So you can go visit those countries.
Right. Okay.
Oh, there's not one.
I just
No.
give
No.
us
There's some good
We'll be
ones today.
But even if they exclude the ovarian cancer, you should get cover for everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
My sister died from ovarian cancer 5 years ago. I don't know if she had a genetic testing, I can't recall. But I have 2 daughters and myself, and so should I have some genetic testing, and what sort of costs are involved in genetic testing? How do you, and where do you go for that?
So that's a good question, and that touches on what we call traceback. So if your sister didn't have a genetic test, but she was diagnosed in South Australia, and there is either a sample of DNA stored or her tumour is still available, the best way from a testing point of view to go is to go back to her samples and test those. And that can be done by her next of kin can be referred, and we do what's called a traceback test, where if there's not a DNA sample stored, we go back and we actually test the cancer, and if we find a genetic error in the cancer, it might be only in the cancer, or it might have been an inherited one, but then we can test family members to exclude them from having inherited something.
And what does that involve, getting involved in the traceback? Do you,
Traceback. So,
how do you do
was your
that?
sister married?
No,
Does she have children?
no.
You're her next of kin.
Yeah.
If you are referred to our service, and there's some pamphlets
Do you
back
have to go to
there
my
and a
doctor
card,
to do that, or?
your GP can refer you to the adult genetics unit. We would see you. Who was her executor of her will?
My other sister.
Yeah,
Well,
so-
actually, 3 of us were.
So the three
My-
of you together, we would see the 3 of you together, and you guys could consent to the testing, assuming she had the high-grade serous ovarian cancer and testing was appropriate.
So, and that sort of information would I have to recon,
If you get your GP to refer you, and
would
then-
you trace back whether she had the high grade serous, or do I have to
Yes.
contact her
No.
oncologist?
No,
or-
we would be able to
You
do
would do all
that,
of
because
that.
we would get you as a family to consent to us getting the information, because you were her next of kin. And so you're effectively her legal guardians now that she's deceased, and so you can sign for us to have access to that information. Then we would look at the pathology and we would make a decision about whether testing should be done and the best way to do that.
And what are the costs? Who, is
There will be
insurance
no
cover
cost.
that or anything?
There will be
So
no
just
cost.
asking the GP.
So if you're an Australian citizen or permanent resident, you would come to our publicly funded clinic and there would be no cost.
Thank you.
So does everybody that you've cut cancer out of, is that stored?
So the requirements are to store a sample from the tumour for a period of time.
Okay.
It's now 7 years.
Longer than that now.
It's 20
Uh,
years, I think.
No,
Is that
it's
right? Yeah,
not.
we're not seeing it on
It's-
We're
and-
hunting down one from 1999 this week.
Oh, wow.
So it so they don't have to dispose of them, but they only have to keep them for 7 years. So if someone's surgery is done in the private sector, it will be gone at 7 years. They will
Oh,
cull
okay.
their samples most likely. If it's done in the public sector, we can usually get samples back for 15 years, and depending on the hospital, we can sometimes go back further. But in the private sector, they keep them for the minimum legal time. They have to keep the report for longer, but the actual tissue samples are being discarded.
I was told at Flinders, even 1970s samples are still there.
So it depends on where it's done.
So you're just saying, if you have go back to that person and you've only got a sample of the tumour and that comes up negative, that's the end of it, is it? Because they could have the...
So it's complicated because we don't know everything about all of the genes that cause cancer, and our testing is not perfect, and so that an assessment is made about a individual person's cancer chance based on their family history and the genetic test results, and those are all put together. So it's very difficult for me to generalise there. I guess one example would be if there was one woman only in the family who had ovarian cancer, there was no family history of breast or ovarian cancer, and the woman was in her 80s and she had a normal genetic test.
Yeah.
we would be very confident that she had a normal age-related genetic rust cancer. But if we had a woman who was in her 50s, who had 4 or 5 or 6 female relatives who had breast or ovarian cancer, and we didn't find a genetic error, we would say there's probably something going on, but we haven't been able to find it because we actually don't know enough. And so then we would still provide information to relatives based on the family history about their cancer chance and what they should do, and recommend that we revisit new knowledge in about 5 years' time.
Can I ask, in that situation, would you call back the family if you find new information?
So at the moment, genetics, the laboratory doesn't have the capacity to keep retesting everybody, so we rely on the doctors who are managing the family every so often to touch base about, is there something new in this family that means we should do new testing? And then if there is something new, then we'll go ahead. Or if there's a new diagnosis in the family and the family let us know, then we again will reassess the family history and make a decision about whether there's something new that should be offered in the DNA sample that's been stored from the relative who's already tested, or whether a new person in the family should be tested.
Fantastic thing that's going on. I've read about it, yeah.
And so family histories change, our understanding changes, our knowledge changes, and our ability to test changes. And so that there's a passage of time and the passage of a family history, we should revisit things. In much the same way as treatments change and evolve, and so that one year there may be a situation where you say, well, we don't have anything to offer now, but for the next generation there may well be a very different story around the treatment.
Going back to the PARP inhibitors, when I started training in oncology, I heard of those drugs, and we never tested routinely for treatment purposes. So in the last 5 to 7 years, become more and more routine testing. Now, a couple of weeks ago, there was a trial result presented in a large European meeting where even newly diagnosed women may end up having a PARP inhibitor after their surgery and chemotherapy, if they have the mutation.
So that's why in South Australia we now offer BRCA1 and BRCA2 testing to any woman with high-grade serous ovarian
Yeah, they told me that
cancer,
today.
regardless of her age and regardless of where she is in her treatment cycle. The Medicare funding is only for women who have relapsed high-grade epithelial ovarian cancer, but if they come to our clinic, the testing will be funded by the hospital, so there's no charge. So if you've got high-grade epithelial ovarian cancer, you should come and see
I got
us.
everything today, so I will be
The
there.
big yellow form?
Yes, I've got it all today. There you go, at the Royal Adelaide. So.
Yes, and we'll see you in there.
Okay,
As
I'll
soon
see
as
you
you've
there.
sent- as soon as you've sent that
I don't know
form.
when, as soon as I get the appointment.
So then her relatives, what would they be thinking?
So
What
we-
should they be thinking?
So they
They're all
should
in Holland.
wait until we've done the test,
No, I'm here.
and
Oh,
then we'll
yes.
talk about it.
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Okay.
But we won't send you an appointment till you send the forms back.
Oh. I thought she said keep them for the appointment. All right.
And
I'll
this-
fill them out tomorrow.
No, she said
To fill them out?
Yeah.
Oh, thank
Yeah.
you. All right, I'm
Fill them out.
thinking
Yeah.
properly at the moment.
Now, family history forms, if anyone has ever got them, they're quite complicated.
Yeah, that she
I
said
got that
it's,
today, didn't
yeah,
I?
yeah.
Okay.
But if you
quite
can't
long.
fill them all out, you fill out what
What
you
you
know
can.
Okay.
Yeah.
and say, I
You
don't know.
Yeah.
And send them back in, you get your appointment, and you can ring around the family and get the additional information
Yeah.
Okay.
between sending back the forms and getting the appointment.
Yeah.
We're pretty
Okay.
flexible.
Yeah.
Fill it out tomorrow.
Yeah.
My son, I'm BRCA1.
Oh.
Anyway, my son he's getting married in a couple of weeks, and he just asked me yesterday about getting tested because he's resisted it. And so does he just ring that number, which I've written down now?
So there are 2 ways he could access testing. He could just ring and say, this is who my mum is, I want to come and have a test, and we'll organise an appointment, or he can see his GP and get a referral.
Oh, okay, so he doesn't have to go through the GP.
He doesn't have to, not in that situation. We recognise that for some people that can be difficult, and it's particularly challenging for young men to take time off work to go to the GP to get a referral. We know exactly what we're going to do. We don't need the GP referral.
Okay.
Yeah, and if you want to give them one of the genetic counsellors, one of the genetic counsellors gave me her card so that there's an actual real name to give, although you wouldn't necessarily get to speak to Miriam, but you can give him the card as well.
Yeah.
If you ring, we
Yes.
won't make him an appointment. He needs to ring.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And the reason for that is that he really needs to be committed to the process. We don't have a long waiting time. Our clinics are booked out to Christmas, but he wouldn't be waiting very long. We would see him in January or February.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Because our line goes back to the Dutch.
Yeah.
And I was just there, and they were saying that my first cousins are being tested, but it takes forever. It's taken them 6 months to be tested in their system.
In the Dutch
And-
system.
In the Dutch.
But
In the
do,
Dutch
do
system.
they
Wow.
know that there's a genetic error that's already been
Yes,
found?
yes, my female cousin there has the whole line, full thing.
All
Breast
the-
cancer, ovarian
Right.
cancer, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And so the brothers, she's got a brother, and they're all trying to be tested. And it's
So-
taking
Yeah.
at least over 6 months. And I was telling them how good our system.
So I have to say, if you were in Queensland, people wait up to a year to get what we call a predictive test, a test for a known mutation in the family. We have made a decision in South Australia that people should wait more than 6 weeks if they want to be seen. So,
Awesome.
Could I just give an example with my family? So once I found out, I told all my children, I told my mother and my sisters, my brother, they're all in Queensland and experienced it. One actually went and paid to have it done, the other one waited 12 months. They both have the gene, but they've never had cancer. My mother didn't really understand what I was talking about. This year, at the age of 89, she's had breast cancer. She's just gone through we celebrated her 90th birthday in July. My daughter has the gene. She's just had a double mastectomy and will have full hysterectomy. Share
She's
everything
had-
with her, but I
She's had
never
a-
wanted to share that.
She's had a preventative one, hasn't she?
Yeah.
She has, yeah. She's had a preventive one. She's made that decision. Yeah. And my boys, one of them went and had the counselling, but decided not to have the testing done. He's one of these people who climbs mountains and paraglides and does crazy, stupid things. But and I think Everest is next in his sights because he's done all the other big ones. Anyway, he decided not to, and the other one, he was only fairly young at the time, and he's like, oh yeah, that doesn't really, I don't have to worry about that now, do I? And I said, no, look, it's entirely up to you. So that's sort of our family, how they've managed it. But we are thinking, having spoken to Nicola, that when Mum dies, we may well ask for her samples from the tumours that she's had from her operation to be tested.
The alternative is that she could store a sample of blood and the GP could just arrange that to store a DNA sample and we wouldn't test it until later.
Yeah. I think in talking to her, it's just too confusing for her.
The
to ask those
GP
things.
the GP could just store the sample and just store it.
Okay, I'll let my sister
She
know.
wouldn't have to get written consent from
Yeah.
Mum, provided you guys were supportive of that. You
Yeah.
could just store it and it's
Okay.
stored.
Okay.
How ready are oncologists to recommend trials for their patients?
It's part of standard care nowadays.
standard
So if they don't talk about clinical trials, then I'm going to be very rude here, change your oncologist. So that's going to be a routine discussion everyone should have.
Yeah.
If there is a trial available in their centre or at least across town, it would be good to have that at least a brief discussion to give that as a choice.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's no progress.
Yeah.
I mean, testing children, I've got a question. So is there a difference you notice between men and women in their refusal to have it tested?
Okay, so the first thing I guess we're talking about testing adult children, so we wouldn't test young children for a genetic error that increases an adult cancer risk. We would leave them to make that decision as adults themselves, and that's because about 2/3 of people decide not to have a genetic test. That's what we've found when we've let people know that there's something in the family. Across both genders, about 30% of people come for a test. If we think about BRCA1 and BRCA2, about 40 to 50% of women come for a test, but only about 20% of men. And I think that's some of that is a misconception that I'm a man, so I can't get the gene, and in fact, male children have the same 50-50 chance of inheriting genetic error. It's just that their chance of experiencing a cancer related to the genetic error is much lower than for women for this gene. If we look at the Lynch syndrome genes, which also cause a small increase in chance.
Can you explain what that is? Lynch, I've heard the
So
words, I don't know what it is.
It's a condition associated with an increased chance of cancer, but the main cancer chances are for bowel cancer and for uterus cancer.
Lynch syndrome.
And in that condition, slightly more men will come and have a test, but women are still much better at coming and having a test, even though their bowel cancer chance is lower than men. But it's changing. I think the uptake of testing is improving as people understand more about the fact that it allows prevention.
I recently saw a young man in his late 20s. Mother has BRCA2, ovarian cancer diagnosed. He refused testing. Now he's developed pancreatic cancer. And within a fortnight of requesting for BRCA2 testing for that particular gene mutation which was found in mum, he has it. And that was the reason why he's developed pancreatic cancer.
That's
It came back as same gene as mutated. So I asked him the question, why did you refuse? He said, I didn't feel like testing, and that's why I didn't want it tested 4 years ago when mum was diagnosed with ovarian cancer.
So can I just ask, if he did get tested back then, what could he have done to change? Can you get your pancreas taken out? And if no, so what could he have done to then
Just have knowledge.
probably would have made no difference.
no difference, right?
Unless you have a low threshold for investigation. He has been having abdominal pain for a while. He's been ignoring it like any young man would do it.
Yeah.
I would still wonder if there's something else.
Yeah, I'll send him across. He's
That's
coming.
very young.
Is there a link? There's no link pancreatic to ovarian.
So there is small increases in the chance of pancreatic cancer with BRCA2 genetic errors, but the chance is still very small. It's still, less than 2 to 3%. So this is a very unusual experience in a very unusual age, and when pancreatic cancer is seen with BRCA2, it still tends to be in people in their 40s and 50s, not in their 20s. So that's a quite remarkable experience.
Just wonder if I can ask Charlotte one final question. For those of us supporting women with ovarian cancer, you touched on empathy as being one of the greatest things we can do. Can you just talk to us a little bit about some of the things? Because often for the carers of women with ovarian cancer, we also feel hopeless and don't know what to do, say or do the right thing.
Yeah,
Just give us
there's
some-
real fear around saying the wrong thing, so sometimes that means people withdraw for fear of upsetting someone. Probably the best thing I can say is listening. Listening is something that we're not really taught. We're not really taught how to listen. When I do a bit of lecturing down at Flinders and I'm lecturing rookie psychologists who are all terrified of doing the wrong thing, I say to them, if you do nothing else, listen and validate, because you can't go wrong with that. Sometimes there's a real tendency for us to want to fix problems, take problems away, and ovarian cancer, like, God, if family members could fix it and take it away, well, I wouldn't have a job. It's just not like that, and sometimes it can feel quite invalidating to have someone busy trying to like, well, if you just do this, or what about this, or what about that, and it's not about that. It's about actually sitting with the distress and letting that person actually talk about how they feel and what their fears are, not judging them, not trying to challenge it, not trying to fix it, not trying to dismiss it. And we don't really do well with distress. It's why we don't do well with death. People don't like sitting with distress. We're not very good at it. So just getting used to that and letting someone be distressed, letting them feel and express how they're feeling, and feeling like it's a safe place for them to do that is really important.
Thank you. I have a question for Charlotte too. That you talked a lot about helping women and men who have cancer and families dealing with that cancer experience. Do you work with people who are trying to make decisions, say they have a genetic error in a cancer gene, decisions about what to do to decrease their chance of cancer? Say, for instance, a young woman who might be contemplating preventative breast surgery.
Yeah, it doesn't happen all that often because genetic testing is not incredibly common, and I guess people probably don't come to me specifically for that, but because I deal with whole families, if it comes up, then yeah, absolutely. I certainly do quite a lot of work around treatment decisions, so I guess as an extension of that. And it's about understanding the difference between emotion-based decisions and information-based decisions. And emotion-based decisions are the ones most likely to lead to regret, and regret is nasty. So what I try and work with is increasing information, and like you guys were all talking about good information, and that's what I want my clients to get, is good information. And sometimes that's hard in the medical system. There's a real power differential, and clients often feel like they can't ask, and they're sitting in a room with one or more specialist doctors, and that's what it feels like. It's like they're sitting there by themselves, freaking out with a whole lot of strong emotions. The last thing they can do is think clearly, much less ask sensible questions. And so they're often operating on assumptions, on bad information. They go to Dr. Google, they go on forums and blogs. They don't get peer-reviewed clinical trial data that they use. And so working with me to try and sort out some of the stuff, I don't give them the information, but I work with them to make sure that they're operating with good information.
Okay, I just wonder if you could all join me in thanking our speakers. We've just, before you go, we've just got a little gift for you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'd also like to thank all of you today for attending. This is our first forum for OCA in Adelaide, and it's been great that you've all taken the time to come out. I'd like to thank Cancer Council and Jill in particular for all her help with organising this. And I'd also like to thank our videographer at the back. He's been quiet all night. Odin Roberts, for all of your work tonight as well. And I just wonder if you would take the time to fill out your feedback forms. That would be really helpful for us for when we're organising future forums. If you let us know what your thoughts are on that. And finally, if you want any more information on the support services of OCA, just come and see Vanessa and I. If you want any resilience kits or want to know any information about what other services we provide in terms of support groups, etc., just come and see us at the end. So again, thank you for attending and have a great evening.
Thank you.